So yeah, we're talking about Malignant. It is a 2021 horror film directed by James Wan from a screenplay by Akela Cooper. Yeah, I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to have to say about the film. I don't think it's my kind of film, but I understand the appeal of it. This super campy, like self-aware parody, I think it's trying to be. Um, it's actually reminiscent of some of the films that we covered, Tom, like Barbarian and Cabin in the Woods, I think.
Cabin in the Woods. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. If you're not like watching this in the theater, with your friends, and it just doesn't really hit the same. Um, I think it's a really interesting exercise, like on how to make like the most contrived, can't be film. Like even from that first scene, right? Like it's that first frame, and even that first image of that hospital is clearly not a real hospital. It's like heavily processed, digitized image. And even that first video that we see from that doctor, and what happens at that hospital, super, over dramatic and um, yeah, it can be. What did you think about those first few images, that first video, Dom? Any it
Yeah,
does
no,
set the
I
tone of it, right?
agree.
I mean, yeah.
I agree. Yeah, it's well, it does and it doesn't, right? Like I agree. Like after this film, I was thinking immediately of Cabin in the Woods, which we've talked about separately, and how if you just compare just the cold opens of each film, right? Because both have a sort of cold open, right? Cabin in the Woods has this basically like office chatter that has nothing to do with a quote unquote cabin in the woods. And then there's this smash cut of the title. And I talked about how that like the film is immediately telling you how to view this film, how to enjoy it, and what it's going to be. And what's interesting is with Malignant, it sort of does, right? In that I think it is immediately campy, melodramatic, sort of quote unquote like terrible. But I don't know that it tells you that it's terrible on purpose. Which is I've been struggling with for a while because I do think it's terrible enough for it to be clear that it's terrible on purpose, but it's not terrible enough for it to be clear that we're supposed to enjoy that it's terrible on purpose. If that makes sense. Like I don't know where that line is, but um put it this way. It's terrible enough that if it wasn't James Wan, I would have correct like thought like, oh yeah, this is just a really bad like a B movie. This is just terrible. But knowing that it'd be James Wan and relatively big budget, and knowing that it's not an accident, they're not like all of a sudden he's a terrible filmmaker. I was confused rather than ready to like revel in it. That's kind of where I was living. Um, and to the point where I was expecting it to be more purposeful, and this is kind of like my main takeaway here is like I thought that there was going to be something in the plot or the story of the film that had to do with either melodrama or like soap opera or B movie. Like I thought maybe it was going to be like a split personality type thing where her sister, who's an actress, was in some B movies and there was some like thing in her memory that was like some reason why this was all happening in this way and so terrible, but then that never paid off. So I was just kind of like confused by a lot of it.
Yeah, interesting points. What about you, Susie? Just initial sort of impressions. Anything you want to add on to there?
Um, like I I didn't hate it. That intros, the that very gothic looking, it actually reminded me of like you guys have seen oh my God, the nuns, the Powell and Pressburger, Deborah Carr and the nuns, Black Narcissus. Have you seen that? It's like kind of that. Um, there is there are like thoughts that are associated with um locations like that and intro scenes like that. So yeah, I love like that you start these talks like with asking us about those intros, so because it made me realize I don't pay attention to the starts of movies very closely. Like even for Darla, and I was like, oh wait, we start and end with like an evening sequence and her alone. That's interesting. Anyway, but like
Yeah,
as
I was
far
paying very close attention to your opening image. Because I thought it was interesting.
oh yeah.
Yeah, because she does take out the trash, right? And then she finds the book.
Yeah.
I remember it because I was paying attention to like, oh, I wonder what her opening is, because it's very important to me.
Yeah.
It's like, and then we get to
Without
the
knowing it, yeah,
yeah,
we
yeah.
wanted to see her alone in a very authentic space where she's not putting anything on and it's just her, but did not really do anything conscious with it, like as far as framing it or bookending it with like the evening images. But like I really like that, and I'm now very conscious of it. And in this one, even though I did watch it, I think like a week ago now, like maybe more, it did help because it was like, oh, and words like campy and all that are being brought up, and I can only agree. However, it's almost like too subtle to be campy. I think maybe this is, I don't know, maybe so you were kind of starting to say same, but yeah, it's like kind of subtle in parts. In that way where like I'll find myself watching something sometimes and it's like it's not like starring Kate Blanchett and everything, but it's like, B, C, D actors maybe. And it's just you have it on and you're not sure whether it's because the character in the thing is supposed to be lying or if it's just that actor not doing particularly well in a scene. And I found like I wasn't sure because like what I knew about James Wan and I really love like that First Insidious and stuff is like this is not necessarily his like idiom necessarily. And so I was like, well, I thought if he was going to do this, just turn it to 11 is like Eric is now saying about me, but anyway.
Would you say that that first video, the hospital video where things are crazy and they're got to cut out the cancer and she's shooting the the
Yeah. Time to
I mean
cut out.
wouldn't you say that that was like heightened to 11, but then the subsequent scene where we get to present day, do you think that was the reason
Yes.
why that shift in like tone? Maybe what did you guys think about that? It's a pretty intense scene.
Well, this is what I'm trying to say. I agree with Susie, but I would not use the words like subtle for this film. But I also agree that like, well, it's too subtle in terms of letting me know that I'm supposed to enjoy how crazy it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like that, I don't know what that middle ground is because again, I was thinking because that my first instinct was like, well, it's too subtle to be enjoyable, and then I like immediately corrected myself in my brain. I was like, what is subtle about this movie? Like that whole opening sequence, and cut out the cancer, the craziness. I was like, this is the opposite of subtle. So it's not that it's too subtle; it's that it's over the top in terms of its sort of camp B movie kind of quote unquote like terribleness and a lot of the things, but it's not. Um, so that makes it essentially quote unquote bad, doing a lot of things poorly, let's say. But something done poorly in and of itself is not enjoyable, right? Like someone saying like, "Oh man, we're going to put really terrible lines and really terrible acting and really terrible lighting in some cases like um in and of itself is not enjoyable. It has to be like this is terrible and we're going to enjoy it because it's so bad, right? Everyone's has that conversation like, well, it's bad, but it's just so bad that it's good. And this is sort of like a movie that lives in that realm of like it's so bad but not so bad that it's good for me. I was just kind of like, well, why? It's pretty long too, right? It's almost 2 hours long.
It's pretty long.
And it's like even though I do recognize that it's on purpose and there it does get kind of bombastic at the end and builds, it's like it doesn't warrant watching an hour and a half of the badness. And the other thing which confused me throughout was that, we're dealing with mental illness in a way. We're dealing with a special, not to go into spoilers yet, I guess, but we're dealing with like there's a reason why some of these things are happening that are part of the plot. But there were things completely unrelated to the main character's mindset that were heightened that did not I didn't the main example being the two cops, right? That's what immediately confused me because I was like, wait, so the three cops actually, there's like the medical examiner woman, and then there's the main cop and his partner, I guess the two main partners. Um, So the one woman is kind of like a, to a certain extent, like a black stereotype. And then there's the guy who has the weird first name, and then there's the coroner, and all of them felt straightly pulled out of like a procedural TV drama to me. I was like, oh, they're doing a send up of like CSI or something like that. Like this is pretty clear. But all of that doesn't make any, like it's not at all linked to the main character's perspective. Like I was willing to buy anything crazy happening if it was linked to the main character's perspective, because I was like, well, she's messed up in the head, or she's got split personality, or something weird is happening here. So anything that happens, we can explain away because it's like it's her weird perspective of things. But then there's scenes that the main character has nothing to do with that are just so heightened and weird and confusing and terrible in terms of dialogue and acting that I was like, shouldn't this part be the sort of quote unquote baseline normal? So that when the weird stuff happens, we know that there's a distinction. But instead, they just chose to make the whole film this like terrible B movie. And I didn't, because there wasn't the contrast, I was kind of like, it was like kind of one note. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm a James Wan fan generally. Like, there's a good number of his films that I've enjoyed. I do think every one that I've seen in a theater has been significantly more enjoyable. And I know that this would have been more enjoyable to like see with the, because maybe the audience is that part that informs you, like, oh, I'm supposed to be enjoying that this is like the terrible acting because other people are laughing at it, you know? So maybe sitting at home watching it by yourself, you want to laugh at it and you're like, wait, but am I supposed to be laughing at this? I don't know. But yeah, this is for me probably the James Wan film that I've seen that I've liked the least out of all of his films.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, yeah, even that, yeah, that second sort of sequence with the after that cold open, the one with Emily and her husband, and like she says something like, I'm feeling tired, I need to rest. And he says something like, I'm tired of you being pregnant, or something like that. It was just this really strange line.
Yeah,
And
no, he's like, maybe you should stop getting pregnant or something. I'm
just something
tired of
has
you
something,
killing my
yeah,
babies. Like, it's. I mean, it is effectively like the worst possible dialogue. Like,
yeah.
I don't think if you gave me a month, I could think of better bad dialogue for that scene. Like, it is so immediately like apparent this is terrible and over the top. And then
It's
he
like
just straight up like
working through
punches her.
yeah, like it
Yeah.
just like smashes her head. It was just terrible. I mean, it's just like
But it wasn't
writers and
funny,
filmmakers.
right?
No, no. I mean, it's just like writers and filmmakers. It feels like them like writing through a first draft, like on the spot and rehearsing with the actors, and that's kind of like the vibe I got.
But it feels worse than a first draft to me. It feels like a fourth draft where every draft you're thinking, how can we make this line worse? Like I think most first drafts, the dialogue is not as bad as this, right? I
Because it was
mean,
purposeful, right? I mean, clearly it was like they were trying to make it, like you said, it was,
yeah,
yeah.
it's like a good singer singing bad notes to me, right? It
Mm.
almost to the point where it's so noticeable that it's distracting. Like it's like if you ask a kid to be random or like, and then you can tell like forced randomness versus like when they're actually being random and it's just not as funny and it just doesn't. But again, like the question becomes how are we supposed to be receiving it? Because yes, it is terrible acting and terrible dialogue in that opening scene. And I think we're supposed to know it is. But ultimately, it's domestic abuse. So I don't think we're supposed to be laughing at it. So
It's
what's the point?
confusing.
Like, what
Yeah.
am I supposed to get out of this? For me, that felt like a soap opera scene. You know, like some of it felt like TV procedural, some of it felt like B movie camp, and some of it felt like soap opera. And for me, that felt like a really bad soap opera scene. So what am I supposed to get out of watching a really bad soap opera scene is the question. Um, I don't know. I probably shouldn't like so for me, the real life terrible equivalent of this, which I think is a very close analog, and this is a terrible thing to say, but do you remember that Britney Spears movie Crossroads?
Did you watch
Anyway,
that,
Britney
Tom?
Spears
I've
was in
never
this
seen it,
movie.
but yeah,
Yeah, Britney Spears in this movie. I kind of half watched it. My brothers were watching at
it's
one point,
Kelly
and I think,
Clarkson, right? Isn't it?
oh, is it Kelly? I don't know. But there's a scene where there's a pregnant girl, and I believe she falls down the stairs, and it's like it's a drama. It's not a comedy at all. But the way it was done was so poorly done that my younger brothers, I remember laughing. And this is a pregnant woman falling down the stairs. There's nothing funny about this, but it was so poorly done that they were laughing, right? And I feel like this movie, you're supposed to be laughing at how poorly done it is, but you don't laugh. And that's because it's someone trying to be bad as opposed to someone who's accidentally bad, if that makes sense.
Is that the what the director is trying to achieve though? That confusion, laughing in one moment and then like being, I don't know what the purpose of that would be though. Like I don't know what
That
the point of that would be.
I mean, I would
I
argue
don't
that those two, like, the ghost hunter characters from the first Insidious, like the two guys, I'm not talking about the psychic woman that comes out later, but like they were comic relief and I thought intentionally put there specifically for that purpose.
yeah. No,
And a
yeah.
lot of people like point to that as like kind of the start of the sort of the waning interest. Sorry, James Wan, I think got me into the Wan, but interest in that movie, but like I didn't mind it. And for that matter, I don't necessarily mind like when a director kind of his aim or her aim is to just like I want to try this. I want to make it, I don't know, CSI soap opera horror mashup.
No, I
I feel like he was trying some stuff. I don't know. I'm with you though. It's sort of like it was actually not good bad enough to be maybe that, like you guys like I like outsider art a lot, and there's sometimes like times when there's better outsider art than but it's like you cannot sort of recreate outsider art unless you are an outsider making art in some
Yeah,
ways.
no, that's what I'm saying. It's like you're trying too hard. You actually are a good filmmaker, and you're not doing a good job of being a bad filmmaker. Is my
It's a
like
weird place to be.
honestly, if I were teaching a film class right now, probably after seeing this movie, the assignment the next week would have been watch this cold open and watch this first scene between this guy and his wife, and actually analyze all the things that make it terrible. Because I do think that's what the filmmaker did, right? The filmmaker knows what makes things terrible, and he added all those things in there because his goal was to make a terrible scene. Like, what's really poor writing? What's really, but again, the question then, and I think he was successful at doing that. But the question then becomes, as an audience watching it, well, why am I watching this? Right? Like, I didn't buy a ticket or turn on to watch an analysis of poor writing, and that's not what I'm here for and what I'm prepared for. So, what's telling me that, like, what's guiding me and how I'm supposed to be feeling about all of this? And that's where I said Cabin in the Woods, they answered that question. What's guiding you is that cold open that has that smash cut that immediately tells you there's no way you could watch this movie and not understand this is a funny movie.
It's fun, yeah. It's fun.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
gonna have fun with this. There's nothing in this movie that tells you that it's fun until, I would argue, pretty late. It tells you that it's bad, but it doesn't tell you that it's fun.
I did laugh out loud at that twist. Spoiler alert, when we see you know the thing in the back
Yeah.
of her head is revealed. I thought that was, yeah, it was kind of the only time that I laughed, I think. I thought it was
Ye
fun. I don't know. It was silly, it was goofy,
It
right?
was it was fun, and it was supposed to be fun, but for me, it was just by that point, I'd have to look at when that happens in the movie. It feels like it's well over an
It's
hour
pretty late,
into
yeah.
it. I had already, quote, unquote, "wasted too much time." Like, I was already too annoyed by the movie and
Mm.
that to, like, be in the mindset to really, like, revel in, like, "Oh, shit, this is turning into The Matrix now." Like, those sequences, and, like, I wasn't able to enjoy them because I already kind of was, like, too far down, like, "I don't get it. It's terrible on purpose. What's the point?"
Yeah, if you're not gonna have fun, or what was it scary? Was this movie scary, Susie? Were there moments of,
No, but I think I was guided to not like, except for like the odd jump scare, and that's like the
yeah.
purpose of them. But like I never, I didn't get worried for anyone. I think that's also another hallmark of like when uh, a horror movie's either failing or flailing or something where it's like, oh, you could die, that'd be fine, Um,
No, if anything, I forgot about the woman who was chained up in the attic for half the movie.
yes, me too.
It was pretty funny when she fell through the ceiling, I thought.
Mhm.
Like I did chuckle throughout this movie a couple of times, but again, it wasn't. Maybe if there were more people laughing with me, I would have enjoyed it. But instead, I was more like, I don't get it. Why? So again, my brain kept being like analytically, like, why is it so bad? And I kept assuming there's going to be some reveal of like, okay, this woman somehow tied into all of this story is like some um other personality that or maybe like in the reality still in the asylum and she's just been staring at like a channel that only plays procedural TV and soap operas all day, and so
Mm.
that's like getting like mixed in. Like I kept expecting like, oh, there's going to be some real reveal on like why everything that we've seen has been this heightened campy thing, because that like her whole perspective is filtered through this in some way, and that just never came. And I was like, wait, so I'm just not going to get an answer for why everything is like that? Like, was I supposed to just accept that those are real characters talking like that? And I think that is the answer, right? Like, even though again they have nothing to do with the main character, but the main character I would have accepted anything. Like she's repressed stuff, she's got this parasitic twin, there's all these things that, like, anything related to her, I'll buy it. That's the movie, that's the conceit. You have to suspend your disbelief. But again, like those cops, there is no explanation for why those cops talk like that and act that way, except for, oh, I thought it would be funny. Um, but which again would be fine if you're writing, if it's a straight comedy, you don't need a reason. Like I thought it would be funny is enough for me. But if you're presenting this super strange horror thriller, I don't know what you would call it, um, I don't know, like again, Cabin in the Woods or Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Like there are plenty of movies that, well, their goal from the outset is to play with horror tropes, for example, and they tell you from the beginning, the point of this is for you to laugh at this stuff. And this movie doesn't have that moment where it tells you the point of this is for you to laugh at this stuff. Um, it just gives you all the stuff that could potentially be laughed at if you know that you're supposed to be laughing at it. Yeah, I
Mm.
really did not enjoy it.
Yeah.
I didn't mind it. I don't know why. Just fine to me.
Did you
Um,
did you like that reveal, Susie? Did you think it was funny? And did you think that whole relationship with the
it was
twin
pretty
was
funny. Yeah. No, it was pretty funny. And I definitely reminded me of like the turban guy from Harry Potter when he's like showing the
Mhm.
oh man, I don't know what you're
but
talking about.
and that also was funny. So I don't know. Is this like a thing? Do people have like a horror of like
Huh.
finding stuff in the back of their head? But
That is
um
a I've seen that before somewhere. I've seen that
yeah, it's
before.
like a
Like
big
especially in
Japanese
Japanese. Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
uh-huh. Um, I think that like if in some fantasy world where James Wan could have like sat us down and been like, I'm not satisfied. What can I do with this? I would have just been like, you're actually probably 2 days from having like a pretty solid horror movie, but you're going to be cutting out some stuff and not like being overly explicit about the mechanics of the like the ghost possession part, or not the ghost possession but the twin possession part of it, where like all of the limbs go backwards and all that. And like I know that there's like a desire to see that kind of thing, but frankly like the fact of like a parasitic twin is very body horror and great. So like if you just took that and showed less than more, you could have something. And then if that's the case, I don't really mind really what the cops are doing, because like to Dom's point, it's all on Emily. You know what I mean? It's all sort of like her, even as she's the twin. And I feel like with just a little bit of tweaking, you could have that. It really just in editing almost.
I don't know. It's just the tone is so hard because like,
Yeah.
because the thing is like that's a different movie, right? Like this is all
Yeah,
about
it is
building towards that
absolutely
moment and
different.
that reveal, and like that's the payoff. So like, and it is all over the top. So if you don't get even bigger, then I don't know where the movie goes to. I think that might make it even worse, like for me. I mean, but what about like, okay, so do you remember when her sister goes to get the records at the asylum years later, and she drives up, and I swear to God, she parks her car at the top of this hill. Do you remember this? It was a while ago, but she parks her car, and it's like, here's our car, and the edge of this giant cliff is like right here. Like we're talking like 6 inches,
Yeah.
like to the point where again I was kind of chuckling at that, but also I was like, what? Like, why? Like, it's not a thing that humans do. Like, you would never just park your car this close to the edge of a cliff for no reason. And it was the same exact feeling that I had with like the banter between the cops and like the zany. It was just so heightened and unreal that I was like, all of this is on purpose. I know all this is on purpose because it's impossible. It doesn't feel like a true B movie where it's all accidental. But that immediately led me to that question of like, well, but why is it on purpose? And I never got that answer. I don't know. Did you guys, it doesn't seem like you had that experience where you were watching and you were just like confused by why things were happening the way they did.
You're right, I didn't. I did dislike it less than you. And I think that with like maybe campy things, you do get that answered because like just any John Waters or whatever, it's always like that's the surface. He's having some like commentary all up under that. So we already know what the actual movie is about. The camp is just sort of like the fun stuff that he's decided to use to show us or expose things about society. This I don't know what its point was.
But it's also like sometimes the visual oddity in the camp is by necessity, right? Like you take like something like Evil Dead or Army of Darkness, and you're like, this is super low budget, and I'm just into it because this is they did it the way they had to do it, and it's awesome. This is such this weird middle ground where they clearly have a lot of money and the ability to do things differently. So they've chosen to do it this way. But it's almost like if you asked a lot of those other filmmakers, like, hey, if we gave you 10 million extra dollars and a good crew and the ability to, would it be this way? And they would all say, like, no, actually, I was trying to do this, but this is what came out. So to have somebody who's capable of doing the better version just choose to be the lesser version, I don't, that's his choice, and I don't have any issue with that. But you have to tell the audience why within the body of the story. Otherwise, you can't be surprised when there's this level of confusion. Um, because I still don't know why, right? Like, I, I don't know. Like, and I enjoy like actual B horror movies too. I mean, maybe not as much as some people, but I'm not like a snob about like something being terrible and therefore it's unenjoyable. It's just there's a feeling about things that are like then when the craft of things is not up to par, but you know that they were trying. It's just like, okay, this is what it is. But for it's almost like a slap in the face when somebody is, could be a good director and good writer and they choose to do something poorly. Um, I was like, well, that's not cool. You have the ability to do it the right. I don't know. It's just weird. And like, we're like with the whole grindhouse and those things, like those are more enjoyable because again, like there was a level of them where the film itself told you like this is fun. And again, I mean, I might as well stop talking. But at this point, what this film was missing is that moment that tells the audience this is fun. It was just the like drudgery for me for most of it.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. That the fun part of it was, I feel like, missing, which is why I think there was a lot of confusion. I've never, I'm not a big fan of those like grindhouse like B horror movie. Yeah, I haven't watched too many of them, but I imagine it would be difficult. I don't know if you guys have tried writing those kinds of films, but I imagine it would be difficult to try writing like that, right? Like to make a B movie on purpose. Um, have you guys written stuff like this before?
I think it would be difficult, but I also would never try it without a reason, right? Like commenting on the B movie genre or like for me, writing this as a straight comedy, I get. and I feel like this is going to be really funny. And like the Zucker brothers did that for years, right? Like Airplane was a send up of other 70s like similar airplane movies like forget the specific one that but or like the scary movie movies, right? Like I'm not saying those are great cinema, but they took Scream and then other subsequent movies and they parodied them directly. And you knew from the first frame this you're the reason you're watching this is to laugh. So if somebody were to say, "Hey, you know what? Sometimes I'm up late at night and I'm watching these terrible procedurals, and all I can think about is how funny they are and how terrible they are. And I want to make a comedy that just pushes that." I get that. I want to see that. But to do it with horror movies, again, like The Evil Dead, they do the horror movie version is you're heightening the horror, right? Like all the blood, all of the excess of the horror elements, you push that to 11. And so I get that because it's like, well, this is pushing the existing. But to take the horror genre and what you're pushing is the bad writing to the extent to the purpose of comedy, it's almost like you're pushing on the wrong elements of it. Like you're heightening the bad stuff. I don't know. I'm rolling it over in my mind for a while now, and I'm just kind of like, what could they have done differently to make me enjoy this more? And I don't think it's like an easy solution, but I didn't understand why I was supposed to be enjoying it.
Mm. The music was interesting. Did you, because they he uses the
The
Pixies,
Pixies
which was
over and
just,
over and over
yeah, it
again.
was confusing.
Well, it's Where's My Mind? It's again, it's pretty on the nose,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah, but it's obviously such a popular song that's been used in a lot of other films. So I wonder why he
it was
made
in the
that choice, you know?
leftovers. It was in the leftovers pretty prominently as well.
Yeah,
Um, I think he made that choice because exactly what you said. Like it's a song that a lot of people are going to know that's very on the nose and clear. Like he's not interested in subtlety. So it's like, why don't we just have them play like Where's My Mind over and over? Like like it's the obvious choice and it makes sense if your purpose is pushing this sort of overly simplified version of these things.
right.
Um, I don't know. I just
Early on, I started trying to predict like what uh the big reveal was going to be. So early on, I was like, oh, something imaginary friend. Oh, it's actually her. Oh, it's this. I think the same way we all do. And then sort of like something happened, maybe like going into leaving like the first half hour, 45 minutes, where I'm just like, I don't think whatever's going to be revealed will be very good. You know what I mean? So I stopped trying to guess it. It's like I remember having a similar thought in something else where it's like when the first bit of something is a little confusing and you're not sure what you're watching, your brain is sense making and trying to put it into like some kind of intentionality in the filmmaker. And it's like, oh, it's actually all toward a path. It's all gonna be because of this reveal. And almost conspiracy theory type of way. But it just, for the most part, it never is. It's always unsatisfying,
well, because the
especially when, yeah,
I think the best versions of it, they do it in a way where you don't even know to think about the reveal, right? Like, like there are movies with famous reveals like Sixth Sense, even Fight Club, or Usual Suspects. I won't say what those reveals are, but like even just knowing that there is a twist or reveal can ruin your sense of the movie
yeah.
because those movies are really successful in that you're not watching the whole movie waiting for there to be a reveal. So it's like they are so good they don't even let on you're supposed to be waiting for something.
It's like
And this
a
movie,
real
you're right.
surprise.
Like,
It's an actual surprise. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Whereas this movie, like you're right. Like I was thinking, oh, okay, it's gonna be some sort of split personality thing we've seen multiple times. And it wasn't exactly split personality, but it didn't actually change like that. The difference in real didn't change anything. And also it doesn't make up for the hour that I had like of not very interesting stuff that I had to watch while waiting for the reveal. Like, you can't undo that. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I don't have don't know if I have too much more to say about it. What
The
about
the
other?
last
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
the last thing I'll say is that, and I hope this is not true, but there is a phenomenon that I think you could track with a lot of directors where once they get to be big enough, there's like a lull in their filmography because they're not surrounded by as much pushback as they were before, right? Like people would just, at this point in James Wan's career, I'm assuming everyone just says yes to him for everything. And that hurts the creative process, right? Like you need people to push back on you and to sharpen you to make things better. And it's like maybe that happened a lot with his earlier movies, and maybe this one they put it together quick. They just did it and they made it. And there's something to be said for lots of people, not necessarily changing the movie, but forcing, like making it more clear in your own mind. Because when they ask you to change something or they ask you a question, you double down on why it has to be the way you want it to be, but you know that much more why that's true. And it just seems like this was not put through like a rigorous process of people pushing back on a lot of the plot holes and again, like, well, maybe it is a little bit unclear to people that this is on purpose, even though it isn't subtle and it is very, over the top. You did a good job at that. Maybe you still need to push it a little bit more to tell us, like, so I hope that it's not sort of like the beginning of a lull in terms of, um, I love Scorsese, and I feel like there was like a period where it seemed like maybe it was a little bit too easy for him to make some stuff. Um, and actually, I mean, I'm just saying him, but actually, most directors,
Most
I think
people,
you
yeah.
could
We are talking
probably
about that with
find
David
that
Fincher last week, right? Like his
potentially,
killer,
yeah.
right? It was just not.
Oh,
I
by the
think
way, Mindhunter season 3 announced.
Oh, was it?
or is it
Yeah.
four?
Oh, is it 4? Anyway,
I
the
don't
next
know.
season.
I didn't know.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. That's
Mindhunter.
awesome.
I need to watch
That's
season
exciting.
one.
Fincher still.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna try watching
It's
it.
pretty
Exciting.
good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It is really
check it
good.
out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a reminder for all of us that, like, as much as it's annoying to have people second guessing you or asking you questions or like making you justify things, it is actually an important part of the creative process. And like I don't know have any insight into the making of this movie, obviously, but so I'm hopeful that I'm wrong. But it could be that there was not a moment for people to like push this for clarity of tone a little bit.
Mm. Yeah. Any sort of final thoughts, Susie? Would you recommend this? What do you think?
No, not really. I think for people that are gonna seek out James Wan's movies, that I mean, it's gonna be required because you're just gonna watch them all. But it's not bad enough to be hilarious. It's not good enough to learn anything from. It's not bad enough to learn anything from.
I think some of the writing could be bad enough to learn something from.
Where, when, what are you
But
pointing to?
literally everything we talked about, like the opening scene, definitely the dialogue between the guy and Emily in the beginning, every single scene with any of the cops in the corner, like, is nothing but on the nose, truly
No, is it?
terrible dialogue. The whole lonely heart thing, like, I mean, the writing was bad enough where it was immediately apparent that it was on purpose, like purposely bad. So, um, I'd be hard pressed to find like a major big budget movie that would be a better thing that I'd recommend to somebody ask me like what's on the nose dialogue. Like I couldn't think of a better movie or a scene from a movie to show them than this, right? And I actually feel okay about it because I do think it's on purpose. Um, but again, I think that's where it has the most value, probably, is as a learning tool for like, okay, what are they really, what do they want to communicate? How do they say that? And how do you not say exactly what you're thinking? And how do real people talk? And it's like the opposite of all of these things.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that discussion. If you found it interesting, informative, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. It'll really help us out. We have some really cool discussions lined up for you, so I hope you're looking forward to them, and I'll see you next time.